Are you having a hard time figuring out what to get Dad for Father's Day? You should check out Row 1 Brand's Vintage Pictorum Gallery. They have America's best sports art. With over 7,200 historic sports prints, you're assured to find something unique for Dad this Father's Day. Instead of a boring old tie, get him a historic baseball photo taken by Henry High Sandham at the historic Polo Grounds Stadium in New York City during the 1894 Temple Cup. Or, if he's an NFL buff, check out the 1963 vintage NFL poster. These are so good looking that you'll be amazed how they turn out. Shop now at sportshistorynetwork.com/row1 and save 15% off your order.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com. On November 25th, 1979, NFL fans first witnessed one of the most recognizable broadcast duos in the history of the game. The rookie at the time, John Madden, joined the veteran Pat Summerall to call the game between the Tampa Bay Bucks and the Minnesota Vikings. This duo played a major role in why I grew so interested in the NFL. In the same year, an organization was founded that, when I started this podcast, I relied heavily on for research, as I still do today. The funny thing is, this organization, just like the NFL itself, was founded in Canton, Ohio.
Welcome to the Football History Dude Podcast, where each episode is a journey back in time to learn about the rich history of the NFL. Your host is Arnie Chapman. Football is his passion, and he wants you to come along with him to explore the yesteryear of the gridiron. So hop on board his DeLorean, and let's get this baby up to 88 miles per hour.
Great Scott!
This time as we step off the DeLorean, the date is June 22nd, 1979, and we're in Canton, Ohio. More specifically, we are in the Hall of Fame, because we gotta be there if we're in Canton, Ohio, right? Well, just 5 months before John Madden and Pat Summerall first paired together, we have to witness something else. This is the founding of what would become the Professional Football Researchers Association. And to give you an idea of what that Professional Football Researchers Association is, here's an excerpt from the PFRA website. Quote, "The Professional Football Researchers Association, PFRA, is a nonprofit organization dedicated to the history of professional football, formed in 1979. PFRA members receive 6 issues of our official magazine, The Coffin Corner. Each issue is 24 pages crammed with articles on the game's players, teams, and games of the past. Members also get exclusive access to the organization's extensive historical archives and the opportunity to vote for the Hall of Very Good." End quote. And I'll go ahead and leave some links to the PFRA, information on how to become a member, and some of the books that were published by the PFRA in the show notes, which of course you can get to the show notes through your podcast player or by heading to thefootballhistorydude.com, which now takes you to my page over on the Sports History Network, the headquarters for your favorite sports yesteryear. This is a network still in the very early stages, so if you know of a podcast or another show that you think would be relevant to be on the network, or if you're looking to start your own history podcast about your favorite sport, team, or league, go ahead and hit us up over there on the website. But to help guide us along this history of the PFRA, this week's guest is President Ken Crippen. And here's a little bit of an introduction for you into what Ken Crippen is all about. He is the president and former executive director of the Professional Football Researchers Association. He has been researching and writing about pro football history for over 20 years. In that time, he has published 2 books and numerous articles. He has won multiple writing awards, the latest being the 2012 Pro Football Writers of America Dick Connor Writing Award for feature writing. In 2011, he was awarded the Ralph Hay Award by the PFRA for lifetime achievement in pro football history. His writing has been featured on National Football Post, Cold Hard Football Facts, The Packer Report, and Coffin Corner. He also has appeared on Fox Sports Radio, ESPN Radio, and WGR out of Buffalo. So now that you have a little bit of a backstory of the Professional Football Researchers Association and this week's guest, Ken Crippen, let's just go ahead and dive right into that interview. The Professional Football Researchers Association, I've used that website extensively, especially at the beginning of my podcasting career, because I did a lot of solo episodes and I really wanted to learn about the deep, rich history, like going way back. And of course, many of your members and many of your authors have had so much time just soaked into diving into old newspaper articles and all these other things. So it was great for me to learn from these guys to be able to kind of express some of those stories on my show. And it got me wondering, what's the origin story of the Professional Football Researchers Association? When did it start? Who were the founders and all those kinds of things?
Well, it officially started in 1979, but it actually goes a little bit before then. Bob Carroll, who was, the founder and longtime administrator of the PFRA, he was doing a lot of research on his own. Bob Runart, he was out in, I think, Washington State. He was also doing a lot of research on his own. And then we had Joe Horrigan, who had just started at the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And he's getting requests from Bob Carroll, from Bob Runart. And he's seeing that a lot of them are focusing on the same areas of football history. So he thought it'd be a good idea to get all of these like-minded people together. So in June of 1979, Bob Carroll, Joe Horrigan, Vic Froland, Tom Nikitas, Jimmy Stewart, and Bob Runart all got together in Canton at the Hall of Fame's Board of Directors meeting room. And they decided to form the organization, the Professional Football Researchers Association, and it kind of grew out of there. So it was the commonality of interests that pretty much brought this group together and got everything founded for the PFRA, and then it just kind of grew from there.
That's cool that they founded them, the organization in the same city as the Hall of Fame. And was
inside
it because
the Hall of Fame?
inside the Hall of Fame? It would have been even better if they would have been able to be in Ralph Hayes' automobile showroom or something like that.
Yeah, that would have been pretty interesting.
So when they started, you said it was a like-minded group of individuals and they all had like the same kind of drive. What would you say would have been their purpose of actually getting together and forming an organization?
I would say the fact that we had people working on similar topics. So to prevent people from doing the exact same work, they thought they would work together. And then that way they'd be able to branch out and get more accomplished instead of having the same people researching the same topics. So I think that was the genesis of putting everything together is let's pool our resources, pool our interests together to make sure that we're not working on the same things and that we're trying to be as thorough as possible with our research. So by forming this group, they were able to accomplish that.
And back in 79, gathering resources and intel on deep long ago's would have been much more difficult than it was or it is today. Did you have any like war stories that they told you about of uncovering artifacts like Indiana Jones or something?
Yeah, not necessarily Indiana Jones, but when I was talking with Joe Horrigan, he had mentioned that, when he started at the Pro Football Hall of Fame, they essentially had a filing cabinet, and that was the extent of their archives. Obviously now it's much bigger when you're talking millions of pages of documents, but essentially to do the research that they were doing, you had to go to local libraries and start looking through the microfilm and being able to research that way. So I know when I was researching some of my books, just sitting there going through microfilm hour after hour after hour is something that is really taxing on you. And so when you start discovering things as your eyes are kind of glazing over, those are the things that really drive you as a researcher. And I think that's what, you would see a lot with these early researchers is they'd be hitting those libraries. They'd be, I've heard stories from Joe Horrigan that, Bob Carroll will be sleeping on his floor so that he can come in locally and do some research, those types of things. So it was really just, a lot of brute force to go through and do this research. But if you look at a lot of the articles that they published and the books that they published back then, it was just amazing the amount of research they were able to do.
So you mentioned sleeping on his floor when he was in town. Was Bob not a local guy, and were the founding fathers themselves not local to Canton?
No, Joe Horrigan, I think, was the only one in Canton, maybe one or two others. I think Vince Popo, who was the first treasurer and longtime treasurer of the PFRA, he was in the Canton area. But Bob Carroll was out in the Pittsburgh area. Bob Brunart was in Washington State. So people were scattered around all over the place. So they weren't all within the same town doing this research. They were scattered around the country.
Why do you think 1979? Why was that the year that they finally decided we're going to get together?
I think it was Joe Horrigan really driving that. And I think it's because he wanted to make sure that he was able to get the two Bobs together, especially because of the similar work that they were doing. But, he was continually getting requests from people for information. And he wanted to make sure that these people weren't doing research on their own, that they were able to combine their resources, share information, stuff like that. So I think that that's why Joe really wanted to get this together. Obviously, everybody else was on board. So now we had the original, I think it was 7 people at that initial meeting. And that just started going from there as they discovered more researchers that were working on things. David Neff has been around for a while. And about his Pro Football Encyclopedia. It was one of the first that really dove into statistics, especially statistics of the early teams. So he deserves a lot of credit for all of the work that he did putting that together. So getting all those people together is really what the driving force was, and that momentum is what made the PFRA grow into what it is today.
What would have some of the action items of these meetings been? Was it more of a sharing knowledge versus a getting certain tasks accomplished?
I think it was a little bit of all of that because, they did formalize this group. They elected Bob Carroll as the first president. They elected, vice president, secretary, and treasurer. So they made it a real group, and they actually incorporated too. They incorporated back in 1979. So they were definitely serious about making this a true research group. But they also wanted to make sure that they kept it a little bit informal. And, as long as Bob Carroll was involved, it was a corporation, but he wanted it to be an informal corporation. So he wasn't really trying to push a lot of the formalities that you would see as a quote unquote corporation. He wanted it to be, a feeling of researchers getting together, sharing knowledge, working together, things like that. And throughout the time that he was running the PFRA, that is exactly how it felt.
Almost like going to, space camp or something for kids when they're younger.
I would say so, yeah. Because even at the early meetings, starting the following year, 1980 is when they had their first annual convention. It was a lot of people presenting their research. But then, you also had talking about 1981, 1982, they started bringing in other guests. So they'd have speakers, even had players coming in, talking to them. They'd watch old game films. So it was a lot of, trying to make sure that they truly understood the history of the game and tried to present as much as possible to people, let people present the research that they're working on. So now you can maybe start digging into other people's areas of expertise and helping them out with research, those types of things. So it's really a group effort and wanting to help everybody else improve their research and help them with their research.
How have the conventions transformed over the years?
The first ones were definitely just smaller because obviously the group was smaller at that time too, but they wanted to keep that intimate feel of a smaller group. But they did have speakers there. Marion Motley, a Hall of Famer, he was one of the speakers at one of their conventions. They had other players there. So those types of things created the foundation of what we have today as far as our conventions, where we're bringing in Hall of Famers, we're bringing in other players, administrators, things like that. And then we also still want to have people presenting their research. So we'll have PFRA members there. We may have other guest speakers that have maybe written books recently to talk about their research. So it has definitely grown. We've had a lot more people at the more recent meetings. We've also gotten teams involved. I think it was 2014 when we had the Cleveland Browns host us. So that was great having that inside access. We had a meeting out in Green Bay at Lambeau Field. And then we're also at NFL Films. So it's really grown. We've gotten a lot more support from the NFL and other NFL entities. So it's really become something special as of late.
With the 100th birthday coming up here pretty soon, did you find that there was a more general public interest in the research history, or was it just about the same?
I would say it definitely did increase. We had more people come to us looking for information, wanting us to talk about things, talking about the history of the game. You do still see within the media itself an emphasis of anything Super Bowl I and beyond, not as much on the early stuff. We started seeing a little bit with the most recent Pro Football Hall of Fame inductions where they're looking at the Centennial class. So you'd start to look at some of the older players, but really the older parts of pro football history are still relatively ignored. So I think that's something that the PFRA really brings to the table is we're focusing on a lot of that older stuff, and we can let people know about the older players, the older teams, and how the league really formed and evolved into what we see today.
That's something that I, as a fan growing up in the 90s, Barry Sanders, if people listen to this show know that's my guy, and the Lions, I really didn't know anything about the history of the game from a before, like you said, Super Bowl I perspective until I started my show and listening to different authors that I brought on the show. And then really I give a lot of credit to, like you said, the PFRA. And I think that you have this new initiative, we'll call it, that is going to really help a lot of other people get involved. And it's called the Biographies Project?
That's correct. Yeah, we have a committee set up specifically focused on writing biographies of players that have played the game, but we're also looking at coaches and administrators and owners. But we really want to start focusing on players. And what we're doing is we're writing biographies. They're usually going to be anywhere between 1,000 words and 4,000 words for each player. And then we'll have all them on our website so that people can start learning about these players that played the game. We're starting off with some of the Buffalo players from the 1960s, mainly because the two people that founded this committee are Buffalo people, and that's their interest. But we're hoping that it's going to spur more people to come in and start writing about other players, other teams, other eras. We do have some on our website already from other teams and other eras. So that's great to see. But it's going to definitely continue to expand over time. It's something that's relatively recent. It's within the last few weeks or so, maybe the last month or so. But it's something that we have seen a lot of interest out of our membership of people who want to write biographies and get them published onto our website so that everybody has access to them.
Yeah, I think that's an exciting opportunity for even, say, budding authors or even people that are just general fans of it, but they want to perform some research on a particular player. It's less cumbersome than saying, I want to go ahead and write a book, or I want to write about an entire decade or something like that. They can pick one player and then they can perform all the research. But with that, also, I do truly believe that your organization is dedicated to accuracy whenever you can find it. What do you have in place on your site that can help confirm the, say if anybody is performing research for their own, say myself, a podcast, is there like a public keeping each other accountable type of thing?
Well, we have a lot of articles and a lot of Coffin Corner articles on there. So the articles are things that came from older books that the PFRA has published. And then the Coffin Corner articles are the ones that within our official magazine, the Coffin Corner, we have published, and we should have every article on the website from the initial release, which was March of 1979. So there are thousands of articles up there. So that's a good starting point for people to make sure that they're getting good, accurate information, because like you said, the accuracy is key, and we want to make sure that we get the truth out there as far as what exactly happened. And so as we're going through and we're seeing new information come up, we want to make sure things get updated. But also, as we are publishing things within our magazine, we have an editorial staff that goes through, does fact checking, wants to make sure things are correct, especially if we've got first-time authors. We want to make sure that we're not only fact checking, but we're also doing, the grammatical checks, make sure it flows well, things like that. So with this editorial staff, we're able to go out there and try to make sure that everything is 100% accurate. If we don't have confidence in it, we're not going to publish it. To give you an example, we had an author write an article about Jim Brown, and there was some discrepancy as far as whether he broke the 1,000-yard mark that one year that he didn't get it. So we were going through all the game books, and every editor that was looking through it was coming up with different numbers as far as exactly what he got for that year. So we would not publish it until we could come to a consensus of exactly how many yards he gained down to the specific yard itself. So that's the type of effort that we want to put in when we're publishing things, is making sure that it's going to be accurate. And if there's any discrepancy at all, we're going to hold it back and not publish it until we are confident that we have the right answer.
I can appreciate that as someone who has, like I said, used your resources many times on my show for performing research. When you've dug through your research, through whether it's your books or anything, whether it's a Coffin Corner, what would have been we'll call it the most interesting Gridiron nugget that you found that just kind of blew you back in your seat and you're like, whoa, I had no idea this had happened?
I would say, especially when I'm going through watching game film of older players, I mean, one of the things that I do is historical pro football scouting reports. And so it's similar to the scouting reports that you have for college players nowadays. I went through and looked at the pro careers of players that I think are either very high in the Hall of Very Good or should possibly be considered for the Hall of Fame. So my partner, Matt Reeser, and I were going through and making sure that, we watched every frame of the game films that we could find for these players and writing up scouting reports on what they were good at, what they were not good at, things like that. A couple of things that struck me is, one is Al Wister when he was playing in the 1948 championship game. Everybody talks about the Jerry Kramer block in the Ice Bowl. You have to watch the 1948 championship game with Al Wister hit his block, because if people want to say that Jerry Kramer's block is a Hall of Fame block, then Al Wister's is just out of this world. He took two people by himself, rotated them 90 degrees to create a huge hole for Steve Van Buren to run through for the winning touchdown on a snowy, icy field. So that if that's not a Hall of Fame block, I'm not sure what is.
Right, yeah.
And then you look at another one, my favorite person that is not in the Hall of Fame that should be is Laverne Dilwig with the Packers of the late 20s, early 30s. And just watching the speed that he had. The thing that impressed me the most about Laverne Dilwig was 27 interceptions in his career. I mean, think about that as a defensive end. 27 interceptions from the defensive end position.
Yeah, that's just kind of bananas crazy to think about it. Because even at that time, I mean, there wasn't as many passing attempts for every game. Every quarterback wasn't thrown. And then even they didn't play as many games per season either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you think about it, too, is the only other person that was even close to that was Don Hudson, and he played defensive back. He didn't play defensive end.
Plus, he had a little insider's knowledge as far as what receivers were going to do, I suppose, too.
He would, yeah. And, that definitely helps when you're playing on the line. But when you're sitting there blocking, the tackle on the other side or the end, depending on where he's lining up, and then you run out to a pass pattern, or you got to go back and tackle somebody at the behind the line, the speed was amazing.
Yeah, that's very impressive, even from my playing days, thinking about the game is a matter of seconds and each play is a matter of seconds. And to be able to go from that position to be able to get in transition back to, covering a receiver out of the backfield, for instance, that's an impressive athlete. That's where I'm going to leave it at.
I mean, it's just astronomical. And when you watch him on film, you can see how he could attain something like that, because the speed at which he could not only get into the backfield, but also to follow running backs or receivers out into pass patterns. It was incredible to see that type of speed. And so it definitely makes sense that you could see somebody like that with that number of interceptions.
So speaking of the Hall of Very Good, have your articles or anything been able to help get somebody that, I'm going to use the word snub, I don't know if that's really the best word, but been snubbed from the Hall of Fame and maybe pushed them over the ledge that you've been involved in?
Well, there's in this last centennial class, we had 4 people that the PFRA officially supported. That's Laverne Dilwig, Al Wister, Duke Slater, and Max Speedy. Duke Slater and Max Speedy were both inducted into the Hall of Fame. Whether it was from us or not, I can't say 100% certainty, but I feel that it definitely had some sort of impact, because we put together fact sheets on all 4 of these players, and all 4 of them made the finalist list, and 2 of them made the Hall of Fame. So I think some of that information made it. I do know for a fact that when Benny Friedman and Fritz Pollard made it into the Hall of Fame several decades ago, that was from information that the PFRA put together for the seniors committee.
Yeah, so going out and getting that intel, maybe that's not readily available for a lot of people because of the length of time that has transpired, maybe helped get them in. Speaking of information, when did the PFRA actually go online?
It was back in the 90s. I think it was 1998 when we first launched the website. And then we launched a forum soon after that. And then it's just kind of grown from there.
Yeah, making information more easily accessible for a lot of people. But at the same time, have you seen any, I don't know, the word drawbacks from going online and having it more accessible?
Well, I mean, the forum part of it, you're always going to have issues. I mean, whenever you have a public forum, you're going to have people that come in there to try to ruin things. That's only natural. You're going to have that. But the fact that the PFRA is online and providing the archives and all the research and stuff like that, I've seen that as nothing but a positive. People have loved being able to go in and get that information. It's spurred people to become members of the PFRA. So it's been nothing but a positive as far as I'm concerned outside of the forum.
Yeah, I would agree. That's just fantastic to be able to have the wealth of information at our fingertips. And because online is much more searchable and scannable than even going through, like you said, those little microfilms, or even having the book that you have to try to get through without being able to press Control F to search. The only thing I could think of maybe, that jumped out of my mind was maybe the romanticizing of, now it's accessible to everybody, and it's not that only a few people have this knowledge, which isn't good, but it's at the same time, it's the allure factor, I suppose. You mentioned the becoming a membership to the PFRA. What would that cost? And if someone were listening to this show and they would be interested in becoming a member, how would they go about doing that?
They can go to our website, profootballresearchers.com, and hit the join link there. If you're in the United States, it's $35 a year. It's $40 a year in Canada, and all other international donations, it's $50 a year. What that gives you is access to the members only section of the website, as well as the full year of the Coffin Corner, the magazine of the PFRA.
Now, what do you see for the future of the PFRA beyond this biographies project?
Well, there's a lot of other items going on. A lot of our members are writing books. For your particular knowledge, there's going to be one coming out on the Detroit Lions, so I know that's going to make you happy.
Woohoo!
So that should be coming out this year. But, there's a lot of research going on by our members, and you're going to see that either in Coffin Corner, or you're going to see that in books. You're going to see that at other websites. So there's a lot of stuff going on in that area. We are going to continue to work on making our conventions bigger and better every single time. We did, obviously, because of the coronavirus, have to push off our convention for this year. It's going to be next year in Canton. But then we're still going to be holding them every 2 years after that. And like I said, we want them bigger and better than ever, with lots of guest speakers, lots of researchers presenting their information, and just making it a fun weekend for everyone. People have loved the last ones that we've done, and they want to keep coming to all the ones that we're going to be doing in the future.
Yeah, and we'll keep promoting that here on the show as well, as far as with the conventions, the Researchers Association. And I think that it's a great thing that you guys do there. Keep it up. And one thing I would ask is, if you were to be able to go back in time to those original, we'll call them the founding fathers of the PFRA, and with all the knowledge we've had over the course of, 40 years now, what kind of piece of advice would you have given them at that time?
I would say that, you've created a great foundation, and we definitely, with, the new technologies and stuff that we have, make sure you take advantage of all the new technologies that come out, so that you can make things, more accessible to people, make it easier for other researchers to be able to do their work and to be able to connect with people within the PFRA. And just, like I said, take advantage of all that stuff to make it great for all the members of the PFRA.
Well, speaking of going back in time again, I do have to ask you a question that we ask every guest. I'm going to give you the keys, the virtual keys to my DeLorean. You can go back in any point in NFL history. You could be a fly on the wall. You cannot change the outcome. What moment would you be going to?
I think that one's pretty easy. The founding meeting of the NFL, September 17th, 1920.
It's hard to argue against that one, but if you could ask one question to that group of individuals in the meeting, what would it be?
I would say, what are you going to do to protect the longevity of the league? Because there are going to be plenty of competitors coming through. What are you going to do to make sure that the NFL always, succeeds and is able to thrive through the tough times?
Yeah, that'd be a good one, because of, like you said, there was so much just animosity as far as leagues coming and going, and teams and coaches and players and all that kind of thing leaving by the wayside. Maybe grab a couple of those beers that they always talk about. They were having beers in the showroom.
Yeah, the buckets on the running boards of the cars there. Just grab a few and just have some fun talking to all of them.
Right, exactly. I think I would like to shake Jim Thorpe's hand, even though he'd probably crush me in it. But besides the fact. Well, all right, Ken. Well, again, thank you for coming on the show. We were going to leave links to everything that we've talked about here in the show notes. And any last parting words of wisdom you have for the fans of the show?
I would say, if you're interested in pro football history, check us out. We would definitely love to have you. And if you're a budding writer, even if you've never written anything before, we have editors that are willing to help you through the entire process. So if you've ever dreamed about seeing your name in print, definitely contact us, and we can help you get started.
There you go. Are you interested in seeing your work online or even in a publication? This is your chance. And another way for you to get your work out there is maybe even share your favorite football moment of all time, or even state your case for who you think should be in the Hall of Fame. You can do so on a segment that I call My Football Moment. And speaking of that, I have one right here for you from Gary in Australia. Take it away, Gary.
This is Gary Jardura and NFLcliches.com. Back in 1972, my parents went to Miami, and they were taken to a Miami Dolphins game. And they brought me back to Australia a great Miami Dolphins denim jacket and the matching jeans. And so my interest in the Miami Dolphins dates way back to 1972. But we didn't get many games in Australia in those days. So when Heaven Can Wait came out, I learned about the Rams. We still didn't get many games. It wasn't until 1994 when I moved back to America to go to film school, and Ace Ventura was the hit movie, and Dan Marino the star, and it reaffirmed my love for the Miami Dolphins. NFLcliches.com. This is Gary Jardura.
All I can say is, alrighty then, a fan from way down under. And speaking of Gary, he mentioned in his My Football Moment about a book that he has. He has a comedy football book called NFL Cliches. I linked out to this on the page as well if you're interested in checking it out. And you can get there by heading to, again, that's thefootballhistorydude.com, which takes you over to the Sports History Network, which is a collection of podcasts, shows, and bloggers dedicated to reliving and retelling some of the lost or forgotten sports stories from our yesteryear. But for now, dudes, I'm through if you're through.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Football History Dude. To make sure you're the first to get the next episode, please subscribe on your podcast player of choice and head on over to thefootballhistorydude.com for the show notes and more information on the history of the NFL. And remember, dudes, where we're going, we don't need roads.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
We here at the Sports History Network proudly partner with 26 podcasts, all revolving around the history of sports. But did you know that many of our hosts were sports history authors way before they started their shows? It's true. We've got Joe Ziemba, host of When Football Was Football, Joe Zagurski, host of Pro Football in the 1970s, Mark Morthier, host of Yesterday's Sports, Tommy Phillips, host of Lombardi Memories, and Scott Adamson, co-host of From the 55-Yard Line. All these authors have many books for you to choose from. To check them out, go to our website at sportshistorynetwork.com/sportshistorybooks. Pick up your copy today. Soundtrack provided by Kevin MacLeod of filmmusic.io.